Second-Hand Time by Svetlana Alexievich, a book with recordings of people who endured the time of the Soviet Union, the World War, and the collapse after the Soviet Union, and ethnic wars that followed, struggles, and for some people, better times. I will read one recording in the middle of the book. It's called A Woman's Story, the title on it. I tell you about my love. The Germans rode into our village in big cars, the tops of their helmets gleaming, young, cheerful. They pinched the girls. At first they paid for everything, chicken, eggs. No one believed me, but it's the honest truth. They paid with Deutsche Marks. What did I care about the war? I was in love. I only had one thing on my mind when I was going to see him next. He'd come and sit next to me on the bench and look at me, unable to look away. Smiling. What are you smiling about? Oh, nothing. Before the war, we'd gone to school together. His father died of tuberculosis. His grandfather was declared a kulak, and they sent him and his family off to Siberia. He remembered how his mother would dress him up as a little girl and tell him that if they ever came for him, he should run to the station, jump on a train and leave. His name was Ivan. He always called me my Liboshka. That was the only name he had for me. It wasn't in the stars for us. We weren't destined to be happy together. The Germans came, and soon after, his grandfather returned. He came back full of hatred, of course. Alone. He'd buried the whole family in exile. He told stories of how they'd taken them down Siberian rivers, unloaded them in depths of taiga, gave them a single saw and an axe for 20 or 30 people. They ate leaves, gnawn bark. His grandfather despised the communists. Lenin and Stalin. As soon as he returned, he started taking his revenge. He'd point them out to the Germans. This one's a communist, and that one, those men will be taken off somewhere. It took me a long time to understand what a war was. I remember the two of us washing a horse in the river, the sun. We'd ride the hay, and it smelled so good to me. I didn't know anything. I never felt that way before. I'd been a simple, ordinary girl, and then I fell in love. I had this prophetic dream. Our river was not very deep, but I saw myself drowning in it. I was sucked in by the undertow, and suddenly I was underwater. I didn't understand how or with what, but someone started lifting me up, pushing me up to the surface. Except for some reason, I was naked. I swam back to the shore. It happened at night, and now it was morning. Many people, our entire village, were standing on the shore. I stepped out of the water, naked, completely naked. One of our neighbors had a gramophone, so that was where young people hung out. We danced, told fortunes about who we would and wouldn't marry using the Book of Psalms, pine-sap, beans. With sap, the girl had to go into the forest and find an old pine. A young one wouldn't do because it had no memory, no powers. All of this is real. I still believe it in today. With the beans we put them into little piles and count them. Odds, evens. I was 18. Again, of course, they don't write about this kind of things in books. But our lives were better under German rule. The Germans reopened the churches, dissolved the collective farms, and redistributed the land. 2 hectares per person. One trailer for every 2 farmers. They established a firm tariff. In the autumn, we give them grain, peas, potatoes, and 1 pig per household. They get their due, and we keep the rest. Everyone was satisfied. Under Soviet rule, we'd been poor. The brigadier will put down a telemark for every workday. In autumn, in payment for all our workdays, we get a big fat nothing. Now we had meat and butter. It was a totally different life. The people were happy that they had got their freedom. We started living according to German rules. If you don't feed your horse, you will get whipped. If you don't sweep the road in front of your yard, I remember the conversations. We got used to the communists, now we all get used to the Germans. We learned to live the German way of life. That is how it was. It's also vivid to me. To this day, at night, everyone was afraid of the forest people who would come into homes, who would come into our homes uninvited. One night they came to our house. One had an axe and the other one was carrying a pitchfork. Hand over the salo, mother, and the moonshine. Don't make too much noise. I'm telling you how it happened in real life, not how they write about it in books. At first, people didn't like the partisans. We set a wedding date after the Zinki, the harvest festival, after we'd finished working the fields and the woman had laid a wreath on the final sheaf. She's silent. My memory grows dimmer, but my soul has no forgotten a thing. The raining started after dinner. Everyone ran in from the fields, and my mother came crying, oh Lord, your Ivan has signed up with the police. You will be the wife of a polizei. No, I can't be. My mother and I wept. In the evening, Ivan came over. He sat down, not daring to raise his eyes. Ivan, my darling, why didn't you think of us, Lyubka, my Lyubashka? His grandfather had forced him into it, the old devil. He threatened him. If you don't sign up with the police, they will ship you off to Germany. Then you can say goodbye to your Lyubka. Forget about her. His grandfather had his own dreams. He wanted his daughter-in-law to be German. The Germans played the propaganda films about Germany, about how good life was over there. A lot of the younger boys and girls believed it. They'd leave. Before setting off, they throw them goodbye parties, a brass band will play. Then they board the trains in their little shoes. She gets pills out of her bag. My health is not good anymore. The doctors say that medicine is powerless to help me. I'm going to die soon. Silence. I want my love to live on. I won't be here anymore, but people will be able to read about it. War raged all around us, but we were happy for a year. We lived together as man and wife. I got pregnant. Our house was right next to the railway station. The German divisions would head to the front. Their soldiers, all young and full of life, belting out their songs. They see me and shout, Mädchen, kleines Mädchen, and laugh. Then there were fewer and fewer young soldiers. Old ones took their place. The young ones had been joyful. This one was somber. Their excitement had run out. The Soviet army was beating them. Ivan, I'd ask him, what will become of us? There's now blood on my hands. I've never shot anyone. Silence. My children don't know about any of this. I've never confessed it to them. Maybe at the very end, right before I die. I tell you one thing, though. Love is a kind of poison. 2 houses down from us, there was another guy who liked me. He always asked to dance with me. I was the only one he ever danced with. Let me walk you home. I already have a chaperone. He was a good-looking guy. Went off into the forest and joined the partisans. People who'd seen him said that he now wore a kubanka hat, with a red ribbon on it. One night there was a knock at our door. Who is it? Partisans. That guy and another older one had come to see us. My suitor started in. How have you been, Mrs. Polizei? I've been wanting to call on you for a long time now. Where's that little husband of yours? How should I know? He didn't come home today. He's probably spending the night at the garrison. Suddenly he grabbed my arm and threw me against the wall. You German puppet, you floor wreck. He called me I can't say it, but it starts with W, and told me to go F. Told me I'd gone with a German toady, Kulak spawn, and pretended to be a virgin with him. That's when he made to reach for his gun. My mother fell to her knees in front of him. Go ahead and shoot, boys. When I was young, I was close with your mothers. Let's give them something to cry about, too. My mother's words had an effect on them. They thought about themselves and left. Silence. Love is something very bitter. The front kept advancing, getting closer and closer. You could hear shooting at night. One night, the guests returned. Who is it? Partisans. My suitor comes in, and there's another one with him. He brandishes his gun. This is what I used to kill your husband. It is not true. It can't be true. You don't have a husband anymore. I thought I would kill him, that I would claw his eyes out. She's silent. In the morning, they brought me my Ivan, lying on a slat, on top of an overcoat. His eyes were shut, his face was like a little child's. He'd never killed anyone. I believed him, and I still do. I rolled around on the floor, wailing. My mother was scared that I'd go crazy, that my child would be stillborn and sick. She ran to get the wise woman, Baba Stasa. I know you have trouble, she told my mother, but I'm powerless here. Have your daughter pray to God. And she told us what to do. When Ivan was taken to the cemetery, I would have to walk in front of the coffin, instead of behind it with everyone else, up to the very cemetery gates, through the entire village. By the end of the war, many men had disappeared in the forest, gone partisaning. There had been a death in every family, she cries. And so I walked, in front of the police-sized coffin. I walked in front of it, and my mother walked behind it. All of the people came out of their houses, leaned on their gates and watched us pass. But no one said a single unkind word. They just looked at me and wept. The Soviets returned to power, and that suitor of mine found me again. He showed up on horseback. They're interested in you. Who? What do you mean, who? The authorities. I don't care where you die. Let them send me to Siberia. What kind of mother are you? You have a child. You know whose it is. I will marry you anyway. And so I married him. The man who murdered my husband. I had his child, my daughter, she cries. He loved both of our children the same, my son and his daughter. I won't speak ill of him on that account. As for me, I was always covered in bruises. I went around with bloody contusions. At night he beat me, and in the morning he'd get on his knees and beg for my forgiveness. He was burned up by some violent passion, jealous of my dead husband. In the morning, while everyone else was asleep, I would already be up. I needed to be up as early as possible before he could wake up so that he wouldn't embrace me. At night, every single window would be dark, but I'd still be up working in the kitchen. All of my pots sparkled. I waited for him to fall asleep. We lived together like that for 15 years, and then he got very ill. He died in the course of a single autumn. She weeps. It is not my fault. I never wished for him to die. The moment came, the final moment. He'd be lying with his face to the wall, and then he turned to me. Did you ever love me? I didn't say anything. He started laughing like he laughed the night he showed me his gun. You're the only woman I've ever loved. I loved you so much I wanted to kill you when I found out I was going to die. I asked Yashka, that's our neighbor who prepares animal hides, for poison. I couldn't stand the thought that I'd be dead and you find somebody else. You're too beautiful. He lay there in his coffin and it felt like he was laughing. I was afraid to go up to him, but I was supposed to kiss him.